A golden carriage glides through the snow-covered streets of St. Petersburg in the harsh winter of 1782. Inside its luxurious interior, a 53-year-old woman reviews military reports, while her generals nervously await her orders. This is no ordinary queen. She is Catherine II of Russia, known to history as Catherine the Great, a German who became more Russian than the Russians themselves, and transformed a barbaric empire into a global powerhouse. But behind the imperial façade lie intimate secrets, unrestrained passions and scandals that shocked European courts for decades. This is the extraordinary story of how an insignificant German princess conquered the world's largest empire, kept dozens of lovers, patronized the arts like a Renaissance benefactor, and died surrounded by legends so scandalous they still spark heated debates among historians today. It is also the definitive narrative about the myths surrounding her death, including the infamous horse story, which, though false, reveals how political enemies can destroy reputations even centuries after death. Sophie Auguste Friederike of Anhalt-Zerbst-Dornburg was born in 1729 into a minor German noble family in Stettin, Prussia. Her father, Christian August, was a Prussian general of limited means, while her mother, Johanna Elisabeth, was a princess, with ambitions far exceeding her social standing. This blend of relative poverty and grandiose aspirations deeply shaped the future empress's personality. From a young age, Sophie displayed exceptional intelligence and an insatiable thirst for knowledge that astonished tutors. Accustomed to the intellectual mediocrity of the German aristocracy, she devoured books on philosophy, history, and politics, developing a sophisticated understanding of power dynamics that would serve her well in her future career. More importantly, she possessed a fierce ambition that set her apart from other German princesses of her time. The opportunity that would change her life came in 1743 when she was chosen as a bride for Peter III, heir to the Russian throne. The selection was political. Empress Elizabeth of Russia wanted a Protestant German princess who could easily convert to Orthodox Christianity and bring no complicated diplomatic alliances. Sophie seemed perfect young malleable and without significant political connections. The journey to Russia in 1744 was a revelation for the 15-year-old. St. Petersburg was a city of extreme contrasts, magnificent palaces built on frozen swamps, nobles dressed in French fashion, speaking barbaric Russian, and a court blending European sophistication with Asiatic brutality. Sophie immediately understood she had arrived in a place where intelligence and ambition could take her far beyond what any German duchy would allow. Her first strategic decision was to fully embrace her new Russian identity. She learned the language with fanatical determination, studied the country's history with genuine passion, and converted to Orthodox Christianity with a devotion that impressed even skeptical clerics. On the day of her conversion, she adopted the name Ekaterina Alexeyevna, Catherine symbolically reborn as a Russian princess. Her marriage to Peter in 1745 was a disaster from the start. Peter was an immature young man, obsessively militaristic and Germanophile to an extent that offended Russian patriotic sentiments. Even more problematic, he showed little interest in his wife, preferring to play with toy soldiers and discuss Prussian military tactics. Catherine quickly realized she had married a man who was intellectually inferior and politically dangerous. During the early years of her marriage, Catherine focused on consolidating her position in the Russian court. She cultivated friendships with influential nobles, studied the complexities of Russian politics, and built a network of contacts spanning the empire. Most importantly, she began taking lovers initially out of emotional need, but eventually as a political tool. Her first significant lover was Sergei Saltykov, a young guard officer who provided both physical pleasure and political education. Saltykov introduced Catherine to the pleasures of the body and the secrets of the court, teaching her how to navigate the treacherous waters of Russian politics. When she became pregnant in 1754 officially by Peter, but possibly by Saltykov, she had learned to use her sexuality as a political weapon. The birth of the future Paul III in 1754 marked a turning point in Catherine's life. As the mother of the heir, she gained a status that could not be easily revoked, but it also sparked Peter's paranoia about his paternity. The already strained relationship between the spouses deteriorated completely when Peter began openly flirting with the idea of divorcing Catherine to marry his mistress. During the 1750s, Catherine transformed into an independent political force. She established an intellectual salon that attracted Russia's finest thinkers, corresponded with French philosophers like Voltaire and Diderot, and built a reputation as a patron of the arts and literature. Simultaneously, she maintained a series of romantic relationships that scandalized the court, but solidified her political support network. Grigory Orlov became her most influential lover during this period. Orlov, a brilliant and ambitious guard officer, saw in Catherine an opportunity to achieve power that his relatively modest origins would not normally allow. Together they began secretly planning Peter's removal from the throne, a conspiracy blending personal passion with political necessity. The crisis came in 1762 when Empress Elizabeth died and Peter ascended as Peter III. His brief 6-month reign was a disaster that validated all fears about his inadequacy. Peter alienated the Orthodox Church, humiliated the Russian army by withdrawing from a victorious war against Prussia, and threatened to divorce Catherine for his German mistress. The coup orchestrated by Catherine and Orlov in 1762 was a masterpiece of political timing and psychological manipulation. Using her network of lovers and allies among the guard officers, Catherine isolated Peter and forced him to abdicate without significant bloodshed. When Peter died, mysteriously days later, officially of colic but possibly assassinated, Catherine became Empress of Russia at 33. The start of Catherine's reign was marked by a fierce determination to prove a foreign woman could rule Russia better than any native Tsar. She immediately launched reforms demonstrating both her exceptional intelligence and intuitive understanding of Russian psychology. Rather than imposing German ideals, she embraced and expanded Russian traditions, presenting herself as the legitimate successor to the great Tsars of the past. Her educational reforms were particularly revolutionary. Catherine established public schools, founded universities, and promoted women's education to an unprecedented extent. She genuinely believed education was the key to transforming Russia into a modern power and invested enormous resources in educational projects that benefited thousands of subjects. At the same time, Catherine continued her love life with a freedom that shocked European courts. After parting with Orlov, she had a succession of lovers that included some of Russia's most talented men. Grigory Potemkin, who became her lover in 1704, was arguably the most significant both personally and politically. Potemkin was a physical and intellectual giant combining military brilliance with strategic political vision. Their relationship transcended physical passion to become a political partnership that transformed Russia into an imperial power. Together they conquered Crimea-founded cities and expanded the Russian Empire to the shores of the Black Sea. Their preserved correspondence in Russian archives reveals an intimacy blending genuine love with sophisticated political collaboration. They called each other husband and wife in private letters, and some historians believe they may have secretly married. Even when their physical relationship ended, they maintained a partnership that lasted until Potemkin's death in 1791. During her decades as empress, Catherine had 22 officially known lovers, though the true number may have been higher. Each relationship was carefully managed to maximize political benefits while satisfying her emotional and physical needs. She developed a system where lovers were generously rewarded with estates titles and positions when relationships ended, ensuring continued loyalty and discretion. Catherine's later lovers were progressively younger, reflecting both her vanity and seemingly inexhaustible sexual energy. Platon Zubov, who became her favorite in 1789 when she was 60 and he was 22, exemplified this trend. While some criticized these relationships as inappropriate for a woman of her age, Catherine maintained that her personal pleasure was a private matter that did not affect her ability to govern. Catherine's political achievements during her 34-year reign were extraordinary by any standard. She expanded Russian territory by over 200,000 square miles, established Russia as a naval power in the Black Sea, and founded over 100 cities. Her charter to the nobility and other legal reforms modernized Russian administration and established principles that lasted centuries. Even more impressive was her transformation of Russian culture. Catherine imported European artists, writers and thinkers, established museums and theaters, and created an intellectual atmosphere rivaling Paris or Vienna. She herself wrote plays, political essays, and even fairy tales demonstrating an intellectual versatility rare among rulers of any era. Her wars against the Ottoman Empire were particularly significant both militarily and diplomatically. Her victories established Russia as the heir to the Byzantine Empire and fulfilled the Russian dream of Mediterranean access. The annexation of Crimea in 1783 was especially pivotal, setting a precedent that would influence Russian policy for centuries. During the French Revolution, Catherine positioned Russia as a bulwark of European conservatism, offering asylum to French aristocrats and organizing coalitions against revolutionary France. Her correspondence with Voltaire and other philosophers abruptly ceased when she realized their ideas about equality could threaten her autocratic empire's stability. Catherine's death in 1796 was sudden but not unexpected for a 67-year-old woman who had lived intensely. She suffered a stroke while attending to official correspondence in her private study, dying hours later without regaining consciousness. Her death closed an era in Russian and European history. It was after her death that the most scandalous myths about Catherine began to circulate. The infamous story that she died during a sexual act with a horse was entirely fabricated by French and Prussian political enemies seeking to destroy her posthumous reputation. This particular slander was especially cruel, exploiting prejudices about female sexuality and political power. The lie's origin can be traced to French pamphlets from 1797, when émigré aristocrats sought to discredit any ruler who had supported Enlightenment ideals. The claim was so obviously false that even contemporary skeptics dismissed it, but it persisted in popular culture because it satisfied fantasies about powerful women being punished for their sexuality. Contemporary medical records confirm Catherine died of a stroke, a common condition for someone of her age and lifestyle. Her personal physician, John Rogerson, kept detailed health records preserved in British and Russian archives. There is no medical testimonial or circumstantial evidence supporting any scandalous stories about her death. The horse myth reveals more about the era's attitudes toward powerful women than about Catherine herself. In a time when female power was seen as fundamentally unnatural, sexual slanders were systematically used to delegitimize queens and empresses. Catherine was particularly vulnerable to such attacks because her love life had been genuinely unconventional by her era's standards. The persistence of these myths in modern popular culture reflects ongoing prejudices about female sexuality and political power. Even today, Catherine is often reduced to stereotypes of a power-hungry nymphomaniac, overshadowing her genuine achievements as a statesman reformer and cultural patron. This historical distortion deprives both Catherine and history of proper recognition for one of the most effective rulers of the modern era. The reality is that Catherine the Great was one of the most extraordinary figures in world history. She transformed Russia from a peripheral barbaric state into one of Europe's great powers. She established cultural and educational traditions that lasted centuries and proved a woman could rule as effectively as any man of her time. Her contributions to political thought were equally significant. Her correspondence with French philosophers influenced the development of ideas about enlightened governance, while her legal reforms established administrative principles copied by other European rulers. She was among the first rulers to articulate a coherent theory of the state's responsibilities toward its citizens. Catherine's system of favorites was also politically innovative. Instead of relying solely on hereditary nobles, she promoted talented men based on merit and personal loyalty. This system allowed her to implement reforms that would have been impossible under traditional aristocracies, though it also created corruption issues that would plague Russia for centuries. Her policies toward serfs were tragically inadequate by modern standards but progressive for her time. While she never abolished serfdom, she limited some of its worst abuses and established legal principles that would eventually facilitate emancipation. Her caution in this area reflected a realistic understanding that overly rapid reforms could destabilize the entire empire. Catherine's cultural legacy was perhaps her most enduring contribution. She transformed St. Petersburg into one of Europe's cultural capitals, attracted international artists and thinkers to Russia, and established patronage traditions that influenced Russian cultural development for generations. The Hermitage which she founded became one of the world's great museums. Her preserved personal correspondence in various European archives reveals a woman of exceptional intelligence and genuine intellectual curiosity. She was not merely a pragmatic autocrat, but a sophisticated thinker constantly grappling with questions about the nature of power, governmental responsibility, and human progress. Her letters to Voltaire, Diderot, and other contemporary intellectuals demonstrate an impressive familiarity with political and social philosophy. The final tragedy of Catherine's life was that her public image was distorted by both admirers and detractors. Admirers idealized her as the perfect enlightened despot, ignoring genuine contradictions in her policies. Detractors demonized her as a cruel nymphomaniac, ignoring her substantial achievements. The reality was more complex. She was a brilliant, ambitious woman who used every resource at her disposal, including her sexuality, to achieve and maintain power in a society that did not believe women could rule effectively. Today, over 200 years after her death, Catherine the Great is finally receiving more balanced recognition from historians. Recent studies emphasize her contributions to Russian political and cultural development while placing her personal life in proper context. She emerges as one of the most fascinating figures in modern history, a woman who transcended limitations of gender and origin to become one of the most effective rulers of any era. Catherine's example remains relevant to contemporary discussions about female leadership and sexuality. She proved women could wield supreme political power without sacrificing their humanity or sexuality, but she also revealed how patriarchal societies use sexual slanders to delegitimize powerful women. Her life offers lessons about both the possibilities of female power and the persistence of prejudices that limit recognition of female achievements. Catherine's relationship with her grandchildren also revealed another facet of her complex personality. She was especially close to Alexander I, the future emperor, personally educating him and passing on her ideas about enlightened governance. This influence manifested decades later, when Alexander implemented liberal reforms and defeated Napoleon, demonstrating how Catherine's intellectual legacy transcended her own life. Her architectural projects permanently transformed the Russian landscape. In addition to expanding the Winter Palace and creating the Hermitage, she commissioned dozens of palaces, gardens, and monuments that rivaled Versailles in magnificence. The city of Odessa, founded during her reign, became one of Eastern Europe's most important ports, exemplifying her strategic vision for urban development. Ultimately, Catherine represents the triumph of intelligence and determination over limiting circumstances. A minor German princess became the most powerful ruler of her era through study, adaptability, and fierce ambition. Her story inspires not only women, but anyone facing seemingly insurmountable obstacles in their aspirations. With enough intelligence and determination, even the most formidable barriers can be overcome.